Today we're going to talk about Python lists, what they are, and a bunch of Python list methods that are very useful when we're coding in Python. So what are lists? Lists are essentially a collection of items, and they're very similar to lists and how we use them in our day-to-day life. We make a list of tasks that we need to do, or make a list of things that we need to purchase at the grocery store. And in coding, you might see that the card that is displayed on a website is a list of items that you might have purchased, or the apps that you see on your phone screen will be a list of apps that you have downloaded from the App Store. And you also see this in different programming languages. In some languages they are called arrays, and the specialty about a Python list is that you can store different kinds of data like integers, floats, strings, and many other things, and a mix of things as well. Whereas in other languages, arrays only allow you to store one type of data. So let's take a look at lists and these list methods. So all we need to do to create a list is to set it to these square brackets and put any kind of data we want inside them. And you can see how it's done here with a list of strings called fruits. Let's try this out ourselves as well. Alright, let's try to make a list containing all different types. I'm going to make a list of things is equal to basketball is a string. I'm going to say 234 is an integer, 5.38 is a float, and I'm going to say print things. So let's take a look what happens when you run this. So you can see this is a list. The next operation we're going to learn about is the Len function. This allows us to get a number which tells us the number of items in the list. Let's try it out. There we go. Now we have 3 items in this list. The most important method in a list is the append method. And this is used to add an item to the end of the list. Let's try it out. So I'm going to say things.append, and I'm going to say a string called grapes. So then let's do. You can see that grapes was added to the end of the list. The next method we're going to learn about is the insert method, which allows us to add an item into the list at any position. It takes 2 arguments. One is the index of where the item needs to be added, and the second is the item itself. Let's take a look. I'm going to insert at the second index, and I'm going to say a string called coding. And then let's see what it looks like now. You can see at the second index, which is 0 is basketball, 1 is 234, and then 2 is coding. The coding string is being added using the insert method. Now, just like we learned how to add something to a list, we will look at the remove method that allows us to remove something from the list using the name or the value of the item that we are removing. Let's take a look. Let's say things.remove, and let's remove the value 5.38. Let's take a look what happens when this is run. You can see that the float 5.38 is no longer in the list. Another way to remove items from a list is the pop method. This method takes an index and removes the element at that index. Now, if you don't provide an argument to the pop method, then it will always remove the last element in the list. Let's take a look. The first thing I'm going to try is say things.pop, and I'm just going to say nothing with the argument, and let's see what happens. And you can see grapes is removed from the end. Now if I change the index to 1 and run this again, you can see that the number 234 was removed from the list instead. Now, the most important thing to know about lists are the words elements and indices, or element and index. Now, index is the position of where the item is in the list, and it starts from a 0. So in this example, you can see pineapple is 0, apples is 1, tomato is 2, and so on. And each of these items inside the list are called an element. Let's take a look ourselves and try this out. So I'm going to run things of 2, and that's how we say it, things of 2. And let's see what it gives us. It gives us the float 5.83, 0, 1, 2. Now, in the same way, if I wanted to give it the argument of the item that I'm looking for and get the index in return, what I would do is I would say things dot index parentheses and do a 5.38 and take a look at what it gives me. It gives me the index 2, 0, 1, 2. Now let's say we want to change the value of a particular element or at a particular index in the list. The way we would do it is just treat it like a usual variable along with the index that we want to change. Let's take a look. Now let's say I want to update things of 2 to a new string called wonks, and let's try to run this and see what we get. You can see how this item at the second index, or the element at the second index, is now the string wonks. Now this is a cool method that allows you to reverse the order of the items in the list just by using a simple reverse method. Let's take a look at how we can use it. If I were to do things dot reverse, and then I'm going to print the string of the list things, and you can see how young wonks has gone to the beginning. That's how you reverse a list. Another useful method for lists is the sort method. Remember, you can only use this when the items in the list are of the same type. When they are strings, it's in alphabetical order, and when they are numbers, they're going to be in the ascending order. You can also use the argument reverse to toggle whether these need to be in reverse alphabetical order or descending order. Let's take a look at how these work. So if I were to do things.sort, and I have only strings, and it works the same way for numbers as well. You can see now basketball starts with B, coding starts with C, and there are grapes after that. Now in the same way, I can also do a things.sort reverse equals, I can do true or 1, and let's do the things and we run it. You can see this time grapes is up front, then coding, then basketball. Now a few more useful methods we can see are the dot count method to find out how many copies of a particular element or item is in the list. The dot copy method for making a copy of the list, the dot extend to grow the list by adding another list to it, and a list dot clear to clear the items in the list and give you an empty list. Let's see how this is to use. Now I'm going to try to do count on grapes, and let's see what this gives us. That gives us 1 as the result because there's one string named grapes in the list. In the same way, the next method we're going to look at is the copy. which makes a copy of the list. So I'm going to say things1 is equal to things.copy, and print things1, and you can see that gives me a copy of the list. Then the next one is the extend. So what I'm going to do over here is try out the extend method, and here you need to provide a list as an argument. Note that, and I'm going to add 2 items to this list, and I'm going to take a look at what it gives us. And you can see that these 2 items have been added to the end of the list. Now the next method we will look at, and the final method, is the clear method. Here what we can do is just do things.clear, and it will remove everything from the list and give us an empty list in the end. Another cool thing to know is that you can actually add 2 lists, which also serves like an alternate to the extend method. So if I were to do things equals things plus things1, now I am going to look at what is there in things, and I will see that it adds up 2 lists and gives us these 3 because one of the lists was empty before. Looping through a list and printing all its contents one by one is a very common use case. It's even used in games while displaying objects on the screen. So you can see how you can do that using the for I in list name. Let's take a look at how we will implement that. So I'm going to say for thing in things, and I like to write it this way because it also makes sense, and you can say singular value thing in multiple values things, or thing in things. And let's take a look. You can see how each item is printed one by one in a different line. The random module also provides some cool methods that we can apply on lists, and these come in handy when we are building game logic. It's the random.choice, the random.sample, and the random.shuffle methods. Let's take a look. Now, I'll import random for this, and I'm going to do choice is equal to random.choice. I'm going to say things, and it's going to give me a randomly chosen item from the list. Mango is what it gives this time. If I were to run it again, I would get grapes, and I would just keep getting different ones each time. The next one we're going to look at is the random.sample, which allows us to get more than one items randomly chosen from the list. And here the first argument is the list, and the second is the number of items that you want to sample from the list. You can store this into a variable called sample, and we're going to take a look at this sample. You can see now it got us basketball, banana, and then another basketball, and in the same way you can keep getting random values from this. The last one for random is the shuffle, and this is also very useful, and this has no return value. All you do is random.shuffle and say things, and then print things to take a look, and you can see that each time it's in a different random shuffled order. Another 2 very important operations is to turn a string into a list and a list back into a string. Now, to make a string into a list, we have 2 approaches. One which will split it based on the spaces or any character that we mention and give us a list in return. And the second is to break it into individual characters using the list function. So let's take a look. So for this, we're going to make a new string. So let's say name, let's say my name is Sachin. Now I could split it up into words or any other character by using the split method. I can do name.split parentheses, and if I don't mention anything, it's going to give me a split by the spaces. You can see that over here. I could mention any other character and it should use that to give me the split. Can you see what happens when you use the U over here? Now, in the same way, I can also break it down into individual characters using the list function, and this will look like this. You can see the individual characters over here. Tuples are similar to lists. The only difference is you can't modify a tuple once it's made. The only two available methods for a tuple are going to be the count and the index. And the difference is that we use the regular parentheses around the elements for a tuple. Let's take a look. So let's make a simple tuple. I'm going to say color is equal to 255243121. This is a tuple that represents a color, and if I try to do a color dot append and say 111, I'll get an error saying tuple has no attribute append. It doesn't have any other attributes either, and it cannot be modified once it's created. Finally, one of the slightly more complex operations that you can perform on a list is called list comprehension. Although it looks a little complex, it's actually very simple. This allows you to create a list and also generate its contents using a loop all in one line. It's a very short way of writing, something that you could do with a for loop with the if condition and some append inside. So let's take a look at how this works. Now, let's say I want to make a loop that contains numbers from 1 to 10. So I will say I for, let's do it as number, for number in range 10. So each time place number into the list for each number in the range 10. So when I run this, what I see is the numbers or are the numbers from 1 to 0 to 9. Now I could extend this further by adding a condition over here and say if number mod 2 or number is divisible by 2 equals 0, only then store the item in the list. When I run it, I will see 0, 2, 4, 6 and 8. That brings us to the end of this video on Python list methods. I hope you enjoyed and benefited from it. Stay tuned to Young Wonks and follow us on our social media handles for more such content.